I want to welcome you to this month's webinar for the National Chimney Sweep Guild membership. One of the biggest challenges today is getting the right people on your team. If you ask anybody that's where people are really having a lot of heartache. But here's the real problem. It's leading people into what we're going to call desperation hiring. In other words, they're simply hiring bodies because they can get them to come to work. And that's not going to produce the rock stars you're truly looking for. You see, hiring and recruiting in this day and time, it's a very skilled game. And a big part of this is the interview process. So, in this month's webinar, what myself, Brandy, and Cheryl are going to talk about is how to do a great interview. The interview process is what you're going to go through to prepare the applicant for the job role that you're seeking them to fill. The interview process is going to tell you about the person. Utilizing the right processes, the assessment processes, the different things can assure you that the people that you are hiring for your team are the right people that are going to help you build that team of rock stars that you're looking for. So stick around. We'll be right back and we'll roll with this month's presentation of how to do a rock star interview that will knock it out of the park for you and produce the results that you're looking for. So appreciate you being with us. Hope you get a lot out of this episode. Okay, so let's rock and roll with today's episode. So the first thing I'm going to ask, and we'll ask each of them to give us their individual opinion on this. Cheryl, do you think today's job applicant is interviewing the employer?
All the time. I think it's much more than it ever has been. They're looking for the particular job. Used to, years ago, we looked for a job that brought us in money and a job that provided for what we needed. It's not like that anymore. They're looking for all the little nuances that are within a company. So they're interviewing the company.
So they're interviewing the company. So that's a lot of this. You're actually on and having to do a performance to sell the company in today's world. Would that be true?
I am.
Okay. So, Brandy, what about your feelings? You do a lot of face to face and you do groups and you do other things. Do you feel like as the interviewer that you're also often being interviewed by the prospects?
Right now it's a seller's market. Right now it's an employee market, not an employer market. And absolutely. So it used to be, you'd go on an interview and you'd spend a lot of time prepping and you were just praying that you got the job. And now it's more that the candidates are going around and doing many, many interviews and they're picking you. You're not picking them.
Got it. So, Cheryl, let's go back to you. One of the things that you and Brandy have both developed is your cache, your repository of questions. And these are questions that you ask over and over and over again of your prospects. What's some of your top questions that you would ask in an interview?
Well, first, I ask them what kind of culture they're looking for because we might as well just clear that on out. And then a lot of them are job specific. Actually, I want to know why, what happened in their last job, who their worst boss was, who their best boss was, who they, I want to know what turned them against the job they're on. I want to find out why they're moving. That gives me an end of what other questions to ask after I know why they left the last job or are they why they are leaving.
Got you covered. Brandy, what about you? What's some of your major questions that are going to be right at the top of your list that's going to start forming how you're going to proceed?
Well, I first want to know why they applied with us, what interested them in us. Then I asked them to go through their resume, but backwards, and tell me what they liked about that job and what they did not like about that job. That also helps give me an idea of what culture they were in and if they have teamwork. If they're going through every single job backwards and telling me that they couldn't stand their coworkers, then that's a huge red flag.
Okay, so those are the type of things that go on. And so if you're listening to us, let me add this in because often all three of us may well be involved in a job interview. This could be a client of ours that is hiring a general manager, a high level person, and often all three of us and the client and possibly people within the company. We have done interviews with as many as 5 to 6 people conducting the interview. And if you want to think about something that's tough from an employee standpoint, think about facing the three of us and the employer and possibly an office manager or other person in that interview. It can be a quite humbling experience for people. So, Cheryl, what leads you in the interview to know that you've got a good prospect, one that you will recommend?
I need to know that number one, he speaks well. That's very important in what we're doing. I need to know his job career. Did he have 25 jobs in 2 years? A lot of times we do. I need a lot of it for me is, and I think it's because I do the behavioral analysis all the time. I'm looking for the reactions to my questions, more of what they're not saying than what they are saying, and how much they're trying to improvise around an answer like they think I want to hear.
Gotcha.
And that gives me a clue as to how they're going to be with their employer.
Gotcha. Randy, what about from your viewpoint? What's your thought process on that question?
Well, I want to go back to first because we said at the very beginning that it's not the same world that we're hiring in. So we used to say hire slow, fire fast, and that is so not true anymore. Now it's you have to hire fast because people are out there and they're getting offers on almost every job that they're going on. I have to look up statistics. So there was an article that was just published a couple days ago from the Society for Human Resources that said 92% of people never finish their online job application, which is interesting because this is something we've really been pushing, right? In my own company, on our website, you can go on there, you can click on it, do an application. But what we're finding out is we have to make it a lot easier today than we used to have to do. I have a gentleman that just shadowed and we are hiring him. Now, when he's an older gentleman and he is looking for a career change. And I knew he wasn't in that big of a hurry. And I always ask them, are you interviewing for other jobs and have you been offered other positions? So with him, since I knew he wasn't in such a hurry, I had him do a job shadow today. However, if I had that candidate that I'm like, we cannot pass him up, and he says, yes, I've got more interviews tomorrow, then I'm probably going to offer him a job on the spot and skip the job shadow, which in the past I would have never skipped the job shadow.
Okay. So you're adjusting to what you're seeing coming in. Okay, Cheryl, let's go to another one. What's the red flags? What are the things people could say that would jump out at you as a red flag to not recommend this person?
Profanity, number one. Like we get that every now and then. What if they get very negative about their other employers, if they breach that way, or like happened a couple months ago, if they pick up a big old marijuana cigarette and smoke it on camera.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to tell a little bit of that story. So why don't you give a little bit of details? Because that was a really interesting occurrence to you that day. How did this occur? That just to speak in layman's term, that you had an applicant picked up a joint in the middle of it and lit it during the interview. What brought that on? Did you make him nervous or what?
Well, no, early on in the interview, I go ahead and breach the question that our client does background checks and drug testing. I do that because it clears up a lot because I have some clients that are zero tolerant. Some will let it pass. So I know which one I need to do at that time. So this guy's on there and it was for a zero tolerant client. And so I brought the question up. We do drug testing and background checks. And he just kind of slung his hair around and he was kind of fidgety anyway. I just thought he was nervous. And he said, well, I'll just tell you, my background check is immaculate. There is nothing on it. But I do love my weed. and blew it out. And so I politely said, I'm sorry, I don't think you're a good fit. And we ended the interview.
Okay, so smoking a joint during the interview would definitely be a red flag. Is that what I just heard?
That would red flag it, even if my client was okay with it. It's just the fact that you would do it on camera is bad enough. I mean, it's recorded.
Yep. So, Brandy, what about you? What are some of the red flags that says we can't use this person?
Yeah, so as the interviewer, we should only be talking about 30% of the time and letting the interviewee talk the rest of the time. So we don't want to be over dominating the interview. And so I just like to really sit back and listen. If they're kind of bossy during the interview, if they have like a know-it-all, like I've studied chimneys, I can do it. I used to lay brick, blah, blah, blah. If they blame, kind of goes back to what Cheryl said about like how they think of their previous bosses. If they come from previous jobs and they're blaming everything on that job and not taking any accountability. And then I like to ask them some questions around trust as well to see, were they trustworthy in their last job? Do they trust their coworkers? Because my culture, we're very teamwork oriented here. And so I want to make sure that I'm getting people that are going to fit in with a team. And so sometimes I'll even ask them, what does teamwork mean to you? What does that look like in a job?
Got you covered. Understand. So, how many people, Cheryl, do you see that sit down for an interview that have researched the company they're interviewing with? Let's just say they're talking to ABC Chimney Company. How often do you see someone that's actually researched the company or possibly the industry itself?
Not as many as you would wish. It's very slim. A lot of them don't even know the location of the company, because that's another question I ask. Exactly where you located, because if they're too far away, it's no use to waste their time. And a lot of them, I have had them where they didn't even remember what company they were interviewing for. So there's a lot less or a lot more that don't do it than do.
Gotcha. What about you, Brandy? Do people, when they come to Flues Brothers, have they researched what you are, who you are, possibly know your core values, all these different things? Do you have this type of person applying?
Yes and no. I find more often than not, it's the people applying for office positions that have done their research more so than techs. But I do have techs that have done their research. And then like Cheryl, I have a lot that haven't. One of the best ways to impress me is to have a really unique targeted cover letter, and then definitely have done your homework on the entire industry. Like I remember one guy that came in and he knew about he had researched the CSIA, he had researched NFI and was asking further questions about those things. That's somebody that, hey, they're engaged and they're looking for a job in this trade, because it's not like we're here hiring for fast food or retail or something that's just really easy to pick up.
Gotcha. So you do see some people that have researched it.
Mhm.
So Cheryl, what about the difference between, we're going to say, an office-based person, a CSR, secretary, dispatcher, whatever, and a field tech? What's the difference in the questions you would ask each of these individuals?
Basically, I asked all the core ones to get my sense of who they are. But I mean, I'll get down a lot of times on a tech that even asked if they can use a measuring tape measure, or if they can climb a ladder, how tall ladders they stand up. The CSR, I want to know how much experience she's had. Can she multitask? Because a lot of my CSRs are talking to people on the phone and doing chat on the computer also. So I've got to have somebody that's very fluent in that. So a lot of it's job based, but that's about the only thing that changes. The rest of the questions are directed at the human person.
Okay, so what you're trying to do, you're trying to find out what this person's core values are. Am I correct?
Yeah, because if I can get core values, if I've got what I need, I can teach a person a trade. But you cannot take somebody that doesn't care about things. I don't care how much they know, you can't make them fit.
Gotcha. So, Brandy, what about you? Is there a difference in the questions you would ask if they were going on one of your field crews versus working in the office?
Yeah, so for the field crews, I'm asking more about, are they afraid of confined spaces? Are they afraid of heights? Tell me about, have you ever done your own roofing or your own sheetrock? So I'm looking more for those skills. Whereas with an office person, I'm asking more about what they know about Excel, what they know about Microsoft Suite. And I'm looking for a different personality as well, because everybody here in my office, we're kind of real upbeat and bubbly. And so I want somebody that's going to fit in really well with that. I've had people come in that have had great office skills, but I knew their personality wasn't going to fit. They were maybe a little bit too shy or reserved to where I thought we would scare them off. Also, for office, I want to know how they handle downtime, and I want to know how they handle it when they don't get a bathroom break, because we definitely have those two complete opposites throughout the year.
Yeah. So, Cheryl, back to you. What is the three leading things, not just benefits? What's the three leading things that you see job applicants are interested in having in their new career?
Their benefits such as insurances and things like that. They're looking for paid time off. And over the last couple months, one of the big ones been birthdays off. So it's that might not be the third one in the pile, but it's asked quite a bit. But they're looking to make sure that you're going to take care of them, that you're going to take care of their family, not so much that they make the salary. The salary's not the big question anymore, not with most of them.
Okay. Brandy, what about you? What's your three leading things that you see a new prospect is looking for in their new career?
I think it depends on the age of the person. My younger employees, right now, diversity and inclusion, that's the hot thing. They want to make sure that they're walking into a very diverse and a very inclusive workplace. Benefits, always huge, no matter what the age group is. And then onboarding. I find a lot of them are really nervous about what your onboarding process looks like. And are you just going to throw them to the wolves, or you actually have a formal training program? And I was looking at another statistic. This one's from Spark Bay that said 70% of companies are not hiring 76% of companies aren't onboarding their new hires properly. So this is a huge concern, because they've had other jobs where they were just sort of thrown to the wolves.
Right. And we'll talk about the onboarding, but I want you to go a little too deeper in two words you use there. When you say the words diverse and inclusive,
Mhm.
a lot of people may not be aware of what you're meaning by that, especially if they're in the age bracket of Cheryl and myself. Okay. These are newer terms. So, what do you mean by they are looking for diverse and inclusive?
Well, luckily I have teenagers, so I understand the diverse and inclusive very well. So they want people that don't necessarily look like them. They want to walk into a work environment where they have people that of all different nationalities. They want people that maybe they use pronouns in the workplace. They want to go to a place where maybe the bathroom is for men and women, not segregated. So this is very, very important to this generation that's coming up in the workforce.
So, now wait a minute. I got to ask a question. Now, you have brought up, and you got to remember, we're from North Carolina. We're much older. So, what you're telling me is they're looking for restroom facilities that are not divided by sex. Did I just hear you correct?
Correct, because that shows a very diverse and inclusive culture. Again, pronouns, she, her, them, they, whatever that may be. You'll notice, and I've even started doing it in my emails, you'll notice a lot of people in the workforce, especially the corporate world, have their pronouns after their name now. That is to show that they are diverse and inclusive. You'll also notice that a lot of places, especially the bigger corporate world now, they actually have whole teams committed to diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So even separate from HR, they have a whole division that is just about diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because I just got back from California, which is other side of the country from North Carolina. So I was at a restaurant and I went to the restroom, and there was a guy standing there in front of the restroom doors. And he said, "Well, which one's for the men?" And I said, "Dude, you're in California. I don't, you must be from my part of the country because we don't have same set, separate sex.
Uh-huh.
This it's outlawed in this state. So, but it's really interesting that you bring that up. That actually, that having a restroom that caters to both sexes is actually something that people look for. Now, I've learned something today, Cheryl. Have you ever thought about this?
No, but I can see one advantage. It would stay cleaner.
Either that or the women would really be upset with the men using their restroom as we approach. Okay. So I can see that one going either way. That's just a really interesting statement right there for sure. Okay. So anyway, as we go through this, what kind of questions does the interviewee ask you that tells you this is a good candidate or we don't want to hire this person from the questions? What's some of the red flag questions that the applicant may ask you, Cheryl?
Okay, a lot of times I like the one that we were talking earlier about training. Do you provide training? Because that automatically tells me they're willing to learn. They want to know if there's group meetings. They want to know if they're going to have to work alone all the time or will they have a teammate. Um, the how are the owners? Are they people that we will get to know, or are they just an entity sitting up there that we will not have any contact with? Is it a family atmosphere? This is the main things that I get now.
Okay, Brandy, what about you?
Yeah, so from a technician standpoint, it's usually about, do you provide the tools or do we provide the tools? Do the work trucks stay here or do we drive the work trucks home? From the office standpoint, I find it's more about dress code, what supplies are provided. Cheryl brought up a very good one, which is professional development. And another statistic I came across found that 94% of employees would actually stay longer at their current positions if their current position would just invest in personal development, which, as you know, this is something we're huge on at CVC, and that's why we're always putting out content and courses.
Got you covered. I understand very well what you're talking about there. So, as we move on through this, it's really another interesting question, and you've both been involved with this one. And that is, we have office staff that is now working remotely. In other words, they are not based in an office. So, Cheryl, when you are interviewing for a remote employee that's going to be working from home, what is the challenges you have in interviewing this person and how hard is it to fill these positions?
Actually, I have a harder time filling the remote than I do in the in office. A lot of people were fine with remote when it was necessary. A lot of them now they're back to it's changing a little bit. They're wanting to get back into the people situation. They're not liking the staying alone. Now I do have some mothers of children that's their that's what they want to do. But the younger generation seem to want to be in the group effect more so than sitting at home by themselves. So it's a big challenge to find for the particular companies that only do remote.
Okay. What about you, Brandy? Because we have clients that you work with that have remote employees. So, what's your thought process, and how do we interview for this remote employee? What difference in this from someone that will be sitting in the next office over from you?
Yeah, I think for remote work, you have to really make sure, number one, that they have the proper setup, that they have a high enough speed of internet, that your phone system can accommodate them at home, and you have the tools to set them up at their house. And I think you have to really assess, do they work well in that environment? Do they work well in an environment where they are by themselves and trusted to be working throughout the day, and not watching soap operas? So 2021 was called the Great Resignation. You've heard that. We've talked about that. So they're calling 2022 the year of the great retention, because obviously it's a lot less expensive for us to, less expensive for us to retain employees than to hire new. And one of the things that they have found with that is employees nowadays, they want flexibility. And so the work from home provides a lot of that flexibility, especially you mentioned clients that we have. I know I have one where they've got to go get their kiddos on the bus before we meet every Tuesday. So if they're a few minutes late, I know it's because they've gotten tied up at the bus stop, and then they'll be coming along. Speaking of the flexibility, I just had we'll call it a save this week. So we had an employee that put in his notice, but he wanted to talk to us about it, which I appreciated. And he put in his notice because he needed better work hours. He has a family, he has 4 kids at home. His wife needs some relief in the afternoon, and his daughter had thought that he wasn't, she wanted him home for dinner every night, etc. And so he had taken a position that the hours were going to be 6 to 2 or 6 to 3. But he asked, is there any way to do flexibility here? And so we were able to look at it and said, because we start at 8, everybody in our company, we can't do 6, but we can do 7. And so through this conversation, we are actually offering to all of our technicians now, you can either start at 7 or you can start at 8. The choice is up to you. So just providing that flexibility so that we can retain them. And it also is flexibility for any new hires we bring on. You can start at 7 or you can start at 8.
Okay, got you covered. So my next question, Brandy, I'm going to go to you first because I'm going to trip your trigger with this one.
Boy.
We're going to be in one of the areas that Brandy will slap your hand really fast, okay? And this is because of all the studying she has done of laws and the legalities of the interview process. So Brandy, what's some of the questions that you should never ask and you could get in a heap of trouble for?
Well, and before we go to the interview questions, I want to back up to even the application, because a lot of people are not aware of the ban the box laws, which is where in certain states, I am not one of them, but many states, you cannot ask about criminal history on the application. Now, once you've offered them the position, with their authorization, you can do a criminal background check, but you are not allowed to ask anything dealing with a criminal history prior to offering them the position. A lot of people don't realize that, and it's still on their applications. I see it every day. You also cannot ask anything that has to do with their age, anything that has to do with their background, their religious beliefs. You have to stay away from all those questions. And it's hard because they'll try to provide stuff and you've got to you can listen to what they say, but you can't go down that rabbit hole. I'll never forget, Jerry, a couple years ago, I was at one of our clients, and I just started working with them, and they had somebody come in to interview while I was there, and they took their picture and got a copy of their driver's license. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, well, we do this for everybody because the owner likes to see, their driver's license and their picture, before he interviews them. And I'm like, you can't do that. The driver's license has their date of birth on there. So that automatically gives you their age, which could be seen as discrimination. I have another client right now, different industry, not the chimney industry, who has 2 lawsuits for discrimination. So you have to be very, very careful and make sure that whoever's interviewing for your company knows those questions you can ask and knows the questions to stay away from. Jeremy, often, my husband, likes to come in when we're interviewing, and he knows to tell him, the girls will stop me if I ask anything illegal, because I always ask something illegal. So he'll ask questions. We have to stop him. Don't answer that. We'll tell him, because he doesn't know what is okay to ask and what's not okay.
Yeah, that's where we got to ban. We need to ban Jeremy from the interview process. He can really be a drag on it, can't he? So, Cheryl, what about you? What's some of the no-nos that come to mind for you?
Brandy pretty much covered the top ones. I mean, it's just the discriminatory things that anything you can think of like that. But basically, she covered them, and it's state mandated. So I have to be real careful. In certain states, I can ask certain things that I can't ask in others.
Right. So we've got to be aware of both the federal laws and the state guidelines. Okay. So Cheryl, here's a biggie. In this day and time, and I don't know how many states now have marijuana has been legalized in. Okay. And we're talking about drug-free workforces. But yet, marijuana is a drug, but it is legal in this area. Well, how's the company deal with this?
Each company has to choose. you do not have to hire them if they smoke the marijuana. You just can't. It's hard. I'm trying to come up with a better way to say it so I don't get myself in trouble here. But yeah, it's hard. I mean, I had an interviewee tell me the other day, now you do realize marijuana is legal in our state, and that's the recreational. It's not just both. Both of them are aware. And so the only thing I can tell them is that my client is zero tolerant, and or either just like I did with them, I went ahead and sent my interview stuff to him. But the very first thing was, he does do marijuana of the night. You need to work this into your thoughts. But it's all you can do. It's hard because it's getting more and more. If it's nothing but the medical marijuana, but like you say, now the recreational is getting extremely prevalent over the country.
Yeah. So we're going to ask our legal beagle, the one that does all the data research down there in the bottom window. So Randy, what do we do? We're in a state that allows legal. You could be located next door to a store that sells marijuana in this day and time. What's the employer to do? Is he forced to hire people that utilize marijuana, or what is the status?
So I want to go back to your first thing where you said you didn't really know the data, because I do. So recreational and medical marijuana, there are only 3 states where neither of those are allowed. And I know that because Kansas is one of them. Next door, Missouri, you can have medicinal marijuana, but I'm in Kansas, which we're one of 3 states that has no marijuana allowed. So you have to treat it like alcohol. So I can drink on the weekend, but I can't show up to work drunk, right? So I can smoke weed on the weekend, but I can't show up to work with weed in my system. And if I'm working in a high risk occupation, which is what chimneys and fireplaces are, I need to know that I can't have weed in my system, especially if I'm up on that roof and I fall, because the first thing they're going to do is test me. And I can't have that in my system, or they're going to deny my work comp claim.
Yep.
So it's tricky. It's changed over the years. I used to tell people federal law trumps state law, and it's still not legal federally. However, that has been challenged in the courts in recent years. And so there is actually case law now where that has not held true.
Yeah. And one thing that small business really doesn't want to do is be that test case. I mean, who wants to go through to be the test case of defending yourself in the court system in today's world?
Well, and I'll tell you, Jerry, so what a lot of employers, including our clients, have just started doing, if they're in those states, they're still drug testing, but they're not drug tests. They're doing 9-panel instead of 10-panel, and they're just leaving the marijuana testing off because we can't fix what we don't know about, right? So it's probably better to not know about it. So they're just still testing, for like the fentanyl, the oxycodone, the heroin, etc. But they're leaving the marijuana panel off.
Okay. So, Cheryl, let me take this. You do virtual interviews with people, and sometimes you actually do the hiring and have them report to work with some clients. Others you set up for interviews. Now, from an interview face to face, what is your thoughts on more than one person interviewing? In other words, they're getting an interview with a group of people. What's your feeling on that process?
It's a lot more intimidating when you've got several people interviewing you. But on the other hand, for the interviewer, you get a lot more diversification because you've got different questions coming from different people. But it's really hard to get, with us doing, the only time we do it's when it's a high position in the group.
Okay. So, Randy, what's your feeling? I mean, I heard you say something a while ago about Jeremy would come in and y'all got to put the brakes on him. But what's your feeling about a group of people conducting the interview?
Well, this is again where Cheryl is ahead of the curve and ahead of the game, because what kind of the new trend now is to do video interviewing. And that way you can have multiple people looking at the interview, but it's not so intimidating with 10 people in the room against one interviewee. So this is where the video interviewing is really kind of the new way to go. Cheryl had sent me 3 several weeks ago for a client, and I was like, I liked the first two. The third one, I just shut it down after a couple minutes. I was like, oh, heck no.
Mhm.
But so then I didn't have to be present for the interview. Her client didn't have to be there. We could all watch it. In my office, so we do open interviews every Wednesday. In fact, the guy that we just hired today, he came in Wednesday. Today's Friday. He came in Wednesday during our open interview time. And so typically what will happen is our office manager will interview them. If she likes them and she's thinking, yeah, they're probably good, she'll bring me in. If I like them and I'm thinking they're probably good, if it's a technician, then usually I will get Jeremy or our director of operations or our field manager, whoever happens to be here at the time, to come in and just make sure that they have the same yes feeling that we do.
Yep. So let's talk about that a minute. You just talked about open hours, and I know this is something that you've been recommending to clients that they have open hour interviews, which I'm presuming means we're going to be interviewing people between, we'll say, 2 and 4 on Tuesday afternoon. Feel free to drop by. Tell us about this idea. How is this working out?
It works out great. It's funny. I have a client in another state that I recommended this to. It's been over a year, maybe 2 years now. It was winter. And the reason I remember this is because they chose a Saturday to advertise their open interview. Only one person showed up, but they hired that person and she's still there. It works out really nice because you pick a day and you pick a wide range of time, and you can do some companies, especially like restaurants, they'll do open interviews all the time. We pick one day because if you get quite a few people come in, you need to have multiple people available to interview them so they're not sitting there waiting. But it works out great for the candidates because they can pop by on their lunch break. You've got this wide time so they can go into work late or leave work early to come in and interview. And so it's not such a set in stone. And for us, again, like I said, we had one on Wednesday that came in and we hired him today after his shadow. So it works out really nicely. I think it's also nice if you're doing your own hiring and let's say you have like 50 people that applied on Indeed, especially like with office positions, you may get that quantity. You can send to everybody rather than looking at all those resumes. You can send a template back to everybody that says, we are doing open interviews on this day between these hours. If you can't make it, call us to set up another interview time. And so it's a quick and easier way to hire because, again, remember what we said, this in 2022, you've got to move fast.
Yep. Okay, so got a question from Jameson Pound, and it says, "What hiring platforms are you using and having the best results with?" And Jameson, so you're aware, we actually did an interview a few episodes back, but I'm gonna let Cheryl go into that. She will tell you what she uses and what she's seeing, and then Brandy will come on top of that. So Cheryl, you go first for Mr. Pound's question.
Basically, most of my clients, not all, are using Application Pro. That it helps weed out some of the ones that you really don't want to hear, but still the majority of the ones coming into there are from Indeed. So Indeed seems to be better for us here, especially in the field that we're hiring for, because more technical people go there than they do to Glassdoor. If I'm looking for an high office staff, sometimes I'll go into Glassdoor. It seems like each of them has their own nuances of what people hire in them. But right now, Indeed, for most of what we're doing, but we're using the platform Application Pro.
Yeah. And Jameson, if you will send either or any of us a email, you can see our emails on the screen. We will be more than happy to send you an intro to Dana, who is our contact person, and the company is Applicant Pro, I believe. Cheryl, is Applicant Pro, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So Brandy, what about you? Where are you seeing the results coming from? And are you using Applicant Pro?
Yes, so we're also using Applicant Pro. You can do LinkedIn, Facebook, all those different places. The nice thing about Applicant Pro is they have access to even more databases, we'll call them, and they do all of that for you, and they write the articles for you, and they know how to write them because they've done the research. I will tell you, going back to a client I have that's in another industry, I just met their headhunter, we'll call her. And so I talked to Jeremy, and we will probably use her in the future. And I'm sorry about my camera. I'm not sure what's going on today with it. But basically, you pay her a percentage to find somebody for you. If they don't work out in 90 days, then you pay her nothing. If they work out, then you pay her headhunting fee. And so I love that idea. It's working out great for this client. And so I am going to try that in the future as well.
Yep, and that's I mean that's kind of like getting a warranty onto them as far as that's concerned. And like I said, Jameson, you can also talk to Cheryl. Like I said, companies like you, she works with and actually does the interview, the marketing, and all that. But what Applicant Pro does is they write marketing copy. In other words, most of the time, the ads that people run are not drawing the attention. So this is bringing you, it is a data-driven program. It's really interesting. So feel free to reach out to Cheryl on that, and she'll help you out. Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and to Jameson, also don't count out employee referral programs. You have great employees. Usually they are the sum of the 5 people they hang out with. So usually they have some great friends that they can refer and offer them a bonus for that. And don't count out when you get good service somewhere, handing them a card and basically recruiting them away from there. That's a big trend right now. And we actually lost an employee this way, a technician. In fact, is companies are looking at employees that they have lost in the past that are good, and they are calling them up and offering them incentives to come back. And we actually lost a technician that way. He was recruited from a previous job, probably offered some promises. I don't think that'll come to fruition, but that's for him to find out. But so you have to look at all the avenues. Don't put all your eggs into one basket, so to speak.
Right. Now, another thing that we stress, if you followed what we teach, what we preach, and like I said, this comes involvement from all of us. Brandy is an expert at this. Cheryl's an expert in this, and I've learned a tremendous amount, but this is their areas of expertise by far. That's what we try to do in our company is we try to come up with experts in all these different areas. So everybody on this screen, we have our own areas. Mine is the training. These girls, these ladies, they know how to run this side. So Cheryl, go back to you. One of the things that we preach is the word assessments, and assessments mean different things. Whenever I say the word assessments, we're talking about assessing for their behavior patterns, and we're talking about assessing for other things. Tell me about some of the best assessments that people can do to see if someone's going to work out in the position.
There's a lot of them out there. My preference is we use DISC a lot. That gives me my behavioral. Another one that I enjoy working with is Color Code. I've had full training in both. So those are the 2 that we use the most. But anything that can qualify you to their business, how their business senses are. The DISC gives you a lot more of their communication skills, their core values, and what they're doing. And as I said earlier, that's usually what I myself am working on is looking at the core value. And then I can teach them what we need.
Okay. And Brandy, you've got assessment tests for other things because what we're talking about, Cheryl's talking about is assessing the interior behavior patterns, but we're also looking for skill assessment. We want to know certain things if they're going to be able to do this proficiently. What's some of these assessments that you would use to check this out?
Yeah, so I suck at Excel. In fact, I called Cheryl the other day with an Excel question. So I want my office people, I always want to hire smarter than myself. So I want them to have really good, sharp Excel skills. So I will have them do an Excel test when they're hired. For technicians, Indeed has some mechanical tests that you can use. We also sometimes will just, ask them about different tools. So we're really just wanting to see what their skill level is because anybody can say they're great at Excel and then you get them in there and they suck. But if you put a test in front of them, they really can't fake it, especially if they're on your computer.
Right. Well, you got to be testing for a lot of things. Number one, do they have decent communication skills? No matter if they're in the field or in the office, they've got to be able to communicate properly with the customer and with their coworkers. They need basic math skills. Okay. They need to be able to read tape measures. They need to know some mechanical things. So this is a system that you've got to develop in your company of putting them through the assessments. So I'm going to share a little story from this week and what I observed. Because this week I was doing an on-site assessment for a client. And that means I spend 2 days at the company. So I was there 2 days and they told me that on 3 o'clock on, let's believe 3 o'clock on Tuesday, there was a job applicant coming in. Hey, this is great. I'm going to be able to observe their interview process. And it was really interesting because they had 3 people involved in the interview. So before the interview came in, they have a training room there. So what did they do? They cleaned the table off. I mean, they took window cleaner. It wasn't just the stuff was off. They actually cleaned the table. Then they took 3 chairs and put on this side and one on that side. In fact, they even told, wait a minute, I've been here. You hadn't cleaned the table for me, and I've been in this room for a day now. You hadn't cleaned it for me. But all of it had a process. And then one of these was a field technician. One of these was an office worker. And the third one was the owner, who's also the general manager of the company. So they went into this interview process asking questions that were all good questions. And then when they got done with that, the owner said, well, I've got some skills that I would like to test you on. And he brought out a tape measure, set it on the table. And when he did, he pointed onto it and wanted the guy from what it was to find out, do you know what those little marks are? Can you actually use a tape measure? And he could use the tape measure. And then the next question was, do you know why that 16 is marked on the tape measure? And he didn't know the answer to why that 16 was marked on the tape measure. Now, Cheryl, why is the 16 so important on a tape measure?
16 inches off center.
Correct. 16 on center. And that tells us right there, he's never had framing experience with carpentry. Okay. We haven't had to ask that question. You see it from there. The next thing he did was he took a cordless drill and a cordless impact driver and set them up on the table and said, do you know what those 2 things were? And I was thinking, okay, if this guy don't know what 16 on center is, he sure is not going to know what an impact driver was. But he did. He knew what the drill was, what the impact driver was. And what did this do? It gave them that he had some mechanical knowledge. At the same time, framing was foreign to him, but reading a tape measure was not. Okay, that's what you're coming out of this. So they put some different tools up. I've seen people do this from putting out a cotter key, a screw, a nail, and then saying, tell me which one is the cotter key. Okay. And if they don't know what a cotter key is, they probably have not dealt with much mechanical stuff. Okay. So there's things like that to test. Then they took him outside and they set up an 8-foot tall step ladder, gave him a helmet to put on, and asked him to climb the ladder, going up and down, watching him. What was really neat was when he came down to the bottom rung, he looked left and he looked right before he stepped to the ground. And that told us this guy knew a little bit about the potential of getting hurt on the ladder. The next thing they did, they handed him an iPad because technicians have got to know how to do forms. And they actually told him, okay, this is how you take a picture. This is how you add the comments, and handed him the iPad. And he was taking pictures of a wood stove that was there. And how did he store them? How did he update it and seeing, could he follow these directions? And all this to me made a pile of sense. Brandy, what do you think of that process?
No, I love that process. And it made me think of our Excel process, because we have a list of instructions that then tells them once they're done with the test that they need to make a folder with their name and put it in there. And it's the same exact thing. Can they make the folder, and can they follow the instructions that that's where it needs to go and not just leave it? I love that. One of the best things you can do, that we did this a couple years ago, really honestly, I think it was when the CVC base camp was fairly new. We had a guy come in that kind of one of those guys that was just a know-it-all, that swore that he knew everything about chimneys. He had come from another chimney company. So we sat him down with the platform and pulled up a test and asked him to take it. He couldn't even get halfway through it, and he was frustrated.
Right. And you're exactly right, because if you go on our platform, what you'll find is we have gas basic questions, quizzes. We have it for chimney. And that's often what we tell. Somebody's applying for a job and they say we have experience. I'll tell them, hey, have them take one of the quizzes in Chimneys 101, or take more. And if they can't score but 50 in a Chimneys 101 question, Brandy, my feeling is they're not real knowledgeable about chimneys, because those are basic questions. Agreed?
Absolutely. And like for office, you need to make sure that, well, first of all, I cringe if I ever hear anybody that has hired an office person without talking to them on the phone. And sometimes we will go into companies and they have somebody that's horrible on the phone. And I'm thinking, did you not talk to them on the phone before you hired them? Because they just don't have the phone skills, but also the spelling skills and the attention to detail to make sure that they're putting the addresses in the computer correct. These are all things that you have to consider, because somebody can interview great and have a great personality, but if they can't put an address into the computer correctly, they're of no use.
Yeah. So this is all part of the processes. Now, like I said, the process for recruiting and turning people into the rock stars, this is just one part, okay? But this is back at the beginning. And my way of looking at it is this is what's going to give you the good seed to grow a great tree. Now, the other things you're going to add is the fertilizer, such as you got to onboard the people. If you don't onboard them properly, and one of the things we profess, we've had a course on this, the first day is the most important day in a person's career at that company. And in that first day, compared to when you went to school and you walked in, maybe it was first grade like it was when we were kids, and maybe it was kindergarten like when other people started. Because when my kids come along, all of a sudden we had kindergarten now. But when I went to school, it was the first grade. And the first grade, and what you're doing when you're that teacher, you're having to blend that child from the family unit into this school. And they've got to do it right at the point. So these are all the things to go there. But to make that rock star, you got to do the recruiting. You've got to do the assessment. You've got to do the onboarding. And then you've got to have a curriculum that they have to follow. And you've got to track it. You've got to measure it. You've got to assign it. And that's one of the things that I talked about last week in our CVC Home Service Success Summit as we were going through it. How do you turn a raw recruit into a rock star in the most rapid manner possible? Now, if you're coming to the HPBA show in Atlanta, I'm actually doing a presentation there based on my book, Step Up to Success, which has taken all of these processes. Because what we've done as a team, like I said, Brandy has shared so much of this with us. Cheryl has shared so much, and what they're able to do is compare their notes and come up. The researcher of the three of us, that's Brandy. Brandy's, when you tell Brandy what we're going to talk about, she's coming back with data points on Friday and everything else. But that's what you've got to do. The first thing that we started, whenever you started, Cheryl, I want you to repeat this. You said you don't hire like you did 20 years ago. Can you reinforce that even more complete today?
Well, it's totally opposite. 20 years ago, or even less than that, we were looking for a job. We were looking for a job with a paycheck that we could remain there for quite a few years. I mean, that was your statue, was to be at the same place for years. Now it's nothing like that. They're not looking for, a lot of times, the particular money. They're looking for a job, usually for a shorter period, much shorter period of time, and they're looking to move on. They want to. Now a career is considered 3 years, where
Yeah.
for us a career was a lot of times a lifetime.
Yeah. So Cheryl, 25 years ago, if somebody had asked you, do you have unisex restrooms? Are you an inclusive employer? Do you have are you a diverse workforce? Would you even know what those words even meant back in those days?
Probably not. I figured they'd be on drugs
You
if they were
figured,
asking me those questions 20 years ago, because no, I could have figured them out, but that wasn't asked. They wanted to know how much they were going to get paid, what time did they go to work, and what time did they get off, and they were pretty good with that.
well, let's ask one more. When do I get paid and how often do I get paid? Okay.
Yeah.
That was a
And
big
usually the
there.
one that I hated the worst, do you pay under the table cash?
Yeah.
And that still happens. That hadn't changed in
Yeah,
years.
yeah, it does. So, Brandy, what about you? Would you agree that it is not your father and mother's company? It's not the world that we grew up in. Even though you're much younger than Cheryl and I are, you've also, at your age, have had to adapt and learning a lot from your own children. And you're very heavily involved with your kids. I've watched you at recitals this week. I've watched you with the kids from shoveling snow and making local money. But anybody that knows Brandy, if you follow her, I can tell you what, when that little girl's dancing on the stage, I can guarantee you Miss Biswell's going to be there, and she ain't going dancing on that stage. So is it a different world today, Brandy?
Well, first of all, Noah has Greece tonight, so I will be at Greece and at
Okay.
the school. So I'm excited about that. It's very different, even different from it's even different from 5 years ago. I wouldn't have thought. And I've had to really adapt. Used to be, I wouldn't hire anybody if they had tattoos showing. Now you can have a whole sleeve as long as it's not offensive. I was on a call the other day with some clients and I said, the girls, and then I caught myself because my kids would kill me. And I said, I apologize. I hope that didn't offend you. I'm trying to really watch and use pronouns. And they weren't offended, but this particular client, one of their office girls has her pronouns on her. It doesn't just say Brandy Biswell. She has her pronouns after it. So I was like, oh, darn it. I hope I didn't. So I'm having to learn and adapt. And that's really what you have to do. 10 years from now, it's going to be even more different. So you can't get stuck in your old ways.
No, you can't. It's like I said, I can remember one of Brandy's hiring challenges a while back because she had hired a new girl and she was almost, is girl wrong here, Brandy? Did I use a new person in the office? Okay.
Yes, she was a she.
Yeah. So we hired a new person and Brandy kind of whispers like, she's got green hair, Jerry. And actually, if you go on to our learning academy, that green haired gal taught me things about younger generations, and she was so helpful. I actually made a recording that's on our Chimneys 101 course because I learned from her how young people learn from virtual learning.
She was
And
so smart. She was wicked smart. I would have really passed up an opportunity had I let the green hair get by me. Now I've had an office manager with purple hair. I just really don't care what color your hair is, as long as you can do the job and do it greatly.
That's it. So that's what I mean. So those are the things because Brandy had to break the mold herself because green hair was a difficult one. We got another question came up or statement from Tom Wright. We're seeing our showroom becoming a hot zone for potential employees. Knowledgeable, trusted customers who trust you are a great feeder to your hiring process. And Tom, that is an excellent addition. We really appreciate that. Tom, we appreciate you. So thanks for adding that. So Cheryl, before we end today's episode, anything you want to add?
Well, the best thing I can tell you to do at this point, over hire. That's what we're trying to push now because you never know when you're going to lose one. It's so much easier to lose. But keep to your core values. Don't hire don't hire out of your core values because it won't work.
Okay. Brandy, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Cheryl. Don't desperation hire or hire just because they have a pulse, but hire fast. You can still fire fast, but you have to hire fast now.
Well, I'm glad you took desperation hiring from me because I was getting ready to say that one in my ending comments because that's a big problem. When you start desperation hiring out of desperation, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. But as we leave this, I want to add one more thing. I want you to think for a minute. We had the Super Bowl just a week ago. And during the Super Bowl, imagine one of those Super Bowl teams coming on the field and did not have a reserve sitting on the sidelines, didn't have a backup quarterback. And see, that's one of the problems is we see people, especially in this age of COVID, okay, when we look at what's here, the absenteeism and the people not being there are astronomical. So one of our positions and one of our teachings are you've got to build your bench. And Al Levy talked about this when he was on, but this is one of the most important things. And that's going to be reflected into your numbers also, because you've got to have a budget for training and building these reserves up. But here's the thing. If you are listening to us, you probably do home service contracting, and you better be aware of something. And this was presented last week in our summit, and that is the ultimate customer experience, which was so great by Scott McCain. And so you'll know, if you weren't able to get that, you can buy access. We'll be putting this up on Facebook very shortly, where you can get recordings of that session from last Monday. Highly, highly recommend it, because you're going to hear Scott McCain talk about the ultimate customer experience. You're going to hear Randy Pennington talk about how culture always wins. You get to hear from three of us, but you hear from us all the time anyway. But you get to hear from Tommy Mello how to scale your business, and Al Levy from the standpoint of manuals and systems in your business. So if that's an interest to you. But today, our mission was to share with you processes and methods that can help you, because here's what you want to do. This is the goal. You got to go find new people. And it never stops. Brandy, do you ever stop hiring?
No, and you like the overhire is really the key right now. And yeah, always overhire.
It's overhire. A friend of mine by the name of Bart Ogden told me something a couple of years ago. He said, Jerry, I've come to the conclusion that if I get 3 to 4 years without someone leaving, that is probably a career in today's world. So what you've got to understand is this is going to be a constant bringing new people in, cycling them through, and you got to develop a system of having the right people and bringing them up to speed as rapidly as possible and turning them into superstars. And when you can do that, you're going to be amazed how successful your business can be.